to come on because there's a lot of information that people aren't quite sure how to interpret, and basically a lot of questions about marijuana, medical and recreational, that a lot of us don't know about. So we asked our guest to come on, who is, I won't ruin the intro, but who is the leader here of a Milford company, Sage.
We actually just changed the name. It's Sierra Naturals.
Sierra Naturals. I was going to say Sage Naturals,
Yeah.
but Sierra Naturals. So let's start with an introduction.
Well, great. Thank you, Al, and thanks for having me on the show. My name is Michael Dundas. I'm a founder and CEO of Sierra Naturals. We are a registered marijuana dispensary here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're regulated by the Department of Public Health, and we operate a facility here in Milford that is a cultivation facility and a products manufacturing facility. So we have about 30,000 square feet of space that we use to cultivate and manufacture cannabis or marijuana products.
Now, one of the things that
We're going to restart only because we had Sage Natural. We didn't get the new
my
name.
fault.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of a rough start anyway, so it works out perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
And just like Sierra Nevada, Sierra everything.
Sierra, S-I-R-A, Sierra.
Oh, okay.
S-I-R-A, Naturals.
That's my fault, because I saw Naturals.
Yeah.
Because I sent to Sage Biotech, or whatever the old one was,
Yeah.
and it bounced back.
Oh, did it? Oh,
So
okay.
then I went to an email I got from you,
Okay.
and I
it
saw
said Sierra
Naturals, and
Naturals.
mentally I just locked in at Sage
Sage,
Natural.
Right. No problem.
That first
And just
B-roll,
Everything's good.
that was all shot up here by the crew. Medical intro was too old.
Start again.
Mhm.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, welcome. Tonight we have a special guest on from a local Milford company that's going to try and help us replace some fiction and some misunderstandings with actual facts. There's a lot of emotion that's gone on about marijuana, medical and recreational. And tonight, hopefully, we'll all learn something about what goes into providing the product and what goes into providing a safe product. So let's start with an introduction.
Al, thank you so much for having me on the show. My name is Mike Dundas. I am a CEO of Sierra Naturals. We are a registered marijuana dispensary, a medical dispensary in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're regulated by the Department of Public Health, and we operate a cultivation and products manufacturing facility right here in the town of Milford.
So help me understand, we have dispensaries and we have manufacturing or cultivation. What does that mean to people?
So under the medical marijuana program that passed by ballot initiative back in 2012, medical marijuana companies are required to be what we call vertically integrated. It means that if you're going to operate a retail dispensary, you also have to produce all of the products that you sell at the dispensary. So on the medical side, all the dispensaries that we have, and we have about 19 dispensaries that are open and operating in the Commonwealth today, all have associated cultivation and products manufacturing facilities. So we're no different. So a manufacturing facility really encompasses two fully different types of operations. One is an indoor marijuana or cannabis cultivation project. We do that, it's an agricultural application. It's essentially indoor gardening. We grow these plants from seedlings, start with seeds, grow them into seedlings, and then we bring them to mature flowers. We harvest those plants, And some of those plants we use to sell as actual old leafy marijuana material you might have heard about. Other of those plants we take and we extract the cannabinoid properties from them. So all of these plants produce, these types of marijuana plants produce this extract we call cannabinoids. Those are the therapeutic elements of the plant that we use for medical purposes. We can take those plants, extract the cannabinoids out of them, and then reinfuse the cannabinoids back into a variety of different types of products. That's the manufacturing side. Of course, we package it all up. It's all going to be in child-proof, tested, labeled packaging, and we take those from Milford and ship them to our retail dispensaries throughout the Commonwealth.
Now, when I think of marijuana, okay, it's just one type, one genus, one little plant, and I sit there and say, I think there's more to it than that.
You know, marijuana is a misunderstood plant for a number of reasons. We have a historical sort of history of demonizing and criminalizing this plant for a variety of reasons.
Reefer madness.
Reefer madness, that's right. I think today, a large segment of our population and a growing segment of the medical community has started to understand that there are properties to the cannabis plant that are truly extraordinary. I would go so far as to say that if we didn't have this history with the cannabis plant, and say, for example, no one had discovered the cannabis plant, if some group of researchers traveled off to the Amazon today and found this plant for the first time ever, it would be hailed as a miracle discovery. Its secretions in the form of these oils on the leaf surfaces are truly remarkable in their therapeutic effects for a variety of different conditions. But there's more. It's not just that it treats a variety of different conditions. It does so with an extraordinary safety profile. So all of these products, these pharmaceutical products and medicines that we take routinely, you see on the commercials, you see it on the fold-out accordion-type labels you get with your prescription
drugs. It helps you with
drugs.
headaches, but everything from one end of you to the other will suffer with 300 side effects.
That's exactly right. Now, cannabis is not without any side effects, but the profile of side effects is extremely short and they're relatively safe. So given the ratio of its efficacy to its side effects or toxicity, it's extraordinarily safe.
Let's start, because if somebody thinks of pot, you think back in the 60s and the movies that, I mean, anybody who smokes it, it becomes an aphrodisiac, it becomes a hallucinogen. I mean, everything in the world that you could associate from LSD properties on, people if you smoke one time, you will become a heroin addict, right? And you sit there and say, okay, so now putting all that aside, what benefits does it have except making me happy and hungry?
Well, there's a whole host of benefits that it has. Since the 1960s, it has been discovered that there's an entire body system called the endocannabinoid system, where these types of molecules, these cannabinoid molecules, fit into these receptors like a lock into a key. And there's still a lot of research to be done, a lot of discoveries to be made. But there's something very unique about this system, this endocannabinoid system, and how these cannabis-produced molecules interact with those body processes. That's unique to sort of drugs of abuse, you might say. It's even unique to alcohol. Alcohol does not act in the same way. Opiate drugs do not act in exactly the same way. Other types of prescription drugs all have sort of receptor blocking or receptor agitating effects. These cannabinoid molecules actually get right into receptors themselves, and they think, researchers are beginning to think, that that's a sort of a special interaction with the human body and may lead us to understand why there is such a low toxicity rate to these compounds. But I think we've seen a variety of different ailments in the Massachusetts medical marijuana law. It calls out 9 delineated conditions, including cancer, ALS, certain types of Parkinson's disease, certain types of reactions to chemotherapy, and other types of diseases and conditions that cannabinoids can help with.
But now, if I've got Parkinson's and they're dealing with all the dopamine antagonists and everything along that line, and I somehow smoke it, eat it, whatever, what does it do for me?
Well, with Parkinson's in particular, and this is not medical advice, I'm not a licensed physician, but I'll tell you anecdotally what we've seen in our patient community is that it helps with tremors, simple as that. And so it can relax the body. It makes you feel much more at ease. And so we've seen in Parkinson's in particular, where you'll have muscle spasticity, that those muscle spasms are helped and eased with the use of certain types of cannabis products. And it's not always true for everyone. That's something that's important to remember, that cannabis acts on different people in different ways. And so it's interesting in the sense that we're used to, in modern American medicine, the idea of being able to prove efficacy with these double-blind, placebo-based
Do
trials.
your phase 1 for safety, do your phase 2 for initial efficacy.
That's
Do your
correct.
phase 3 for real efficacy testing.
That is correct, and there's nothing wrong. I certainly wouldn't impugn the idea of doing this type of testing for drugs. I would say, however, and again, I don't want to harp on this, but I think it's an important point, that the safety profile of cannabis is what gives physicians some level of comfort with allowing their patients, certifying their patients to use cannabis on a test basis. Try a little bit of this, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, try a little bit of this other type of cannabis. And to your original question, there are a variety of types of cannabis out there we can talk about. But it allows patients to sort of titrate to effect, to see if it works for them. If it works, great. If it doesn't, move on to something else, maybe something of a different nature.
Well,
but you're not going to get into any kind of toxicity trouble.
You take an indication like Parkinson's. Cannabis isn't going to cure it.
That's for sure.
But I remember when my darling bride was involved with Michael J. Fox and his foundation, we would go down once a year. He had a fundraiser. A funny thing happened on the way to curing Parkinson's. And you saw it when he didn't medicate, and he did it intentionally, the effect of the tremors. Or one day, next to our table was Muhammad Ali. And it was frightening to see how incredibly controlling that Parkinson's was, the tremors. He couldn't even talk sometimes.
Yeah.
So, just improving the quality of life to let you calm down. Do you have the same issue where eventually you blow out the receptors? Where you become less and less effective?
I think there is some evidence to suggest that folks do produce a tolerance to cannabis use. And this is another reason why the safety profile is so important, because you can take higher and higher levels of cannabis without having higher and higher levels of these types of negative side effects. Yes, it's true that there is not a dependence, but a tolerance that is built around use of cannabis. And it's another one of these interesting issues because as you develop a tolerance, you take more, but you're also able to function in life with a higher level of the medication in your system. This is actually a kind of a vexing problem for impaired driving. So we're working with the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security to try to figure out why or how we might be able to detect impairment in driving. It's a very difficult thing to do. With alcohol, you can use a simple test. If you've got X number of sort of milligrams per deciliter of blood in your alcohol, you're impaired. And that's pretty true across a wide spectrum of our population.
But how do you do that with cannabis, where people's tolerance levels seem to vary so broadly?
It's much more difficult. And in fact, so far, it's proven impossible for researchers to crack this code. In Milford, we've actually worked with a research firm that's trying to sort of proof of concept that they can catch THC, which is one of the active cannabinoids in cannabis, in these membranes, in the hopes of trying to be able to find a device that would detect impairment. But I think, as we just discussed, added tolerance really is a problem for detecting impairment, because just the level of cannabinoids in your system is not necessarily indicative of impairment. So I think there's still quite a ways to go when trying to detect
But
impairment.
isn't that where we started with alcohol? I mean, you think about it, you'd have people walk the line, or you did certain physical tests. And if somebody couldn't walk toe to toe or couldn't say the alphabet backwards, you said,
That's right. And I think you ask law enforcement, they'll tell you today that the best way to find whether you're impaired or not impaired on cannabis is to do just that, field sobriety testing. Have trained police officers that are able to spot certain types of behaviors that go along with impairment. That's the best we can do today.
But that's the same as any drug that you take. You could take a painkiller.
Sure.
And,
That's correct.
for somebody, one, one bit of oxy and they're gone for a long period of time. For people who've been taking pain medication for chronic illness, they may be able to function absolutely normally, not at a crazy level, but at a reasonable level. And then how do you detect it?
That's a great point.
Now, again, you think of, and I pardon me for being ignorant, but pot is pot. Yet I hear you say there are multiple types.
That's correct.
What types are there?
So, in the past, when cannabis was sold in the underground marketplace, an unregulated marketplace, one would simply purchase whatever happened to be available at that particular moment. But it turns out that cannabis is a diverse sort of family of plants that all produce varying amounts and varying ratios of these cannabinoid compounds. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is just one of these compounds.
That's the only one we ever heard of.
That's correct.
You never heard of cannabinoid distillates, or you just heard of THC.
That's correct. That's right. In fact, there are between 60 and 100 known cannabinoids in the plant. A couple of them have been more well-known lately, apart from THC. CBD, cannabidiol, is sort of had its day in the sun in terms of media coverage lately. It is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid that seems to have a variety of different therapeutic applications, which is nice. We've seen this applied to epilepsy, to Parkinson's and other spasticity disorders, that type of thing. And there's still ongoing research as to the efficacy of CBD. But interestingly, the ratios and how these cannabinoids interact with each other in an administration of cannabis medicine, it seems to be critical to the therapeutic effects. So cannabis used to be divided really into two families, one that was called indica and one that was called sativa. And each of these families sort of had vague descriptions about the types of effects that the plant would have. They have very different morphological or physical appearance characteristics. Indica plants tend to be shorter with thicker leaves. The sativa plants tend to be taller with thinner leaves. At the end of the day, though, as we look more carefully through testing, genetic testing, and cannabinoid profiling, we're finding out that there really is less of a difference, or there really is no bright line, I should say, between indicas and sativas. Maybe on the far spectrum of each end you can tell the two apart, but somewhere in the middle, between in a hybrid area, it's very difficult to tell the two apart. And so cannabinoid profiling is probably the single best way that we can predict the effects of cannabis medicine. And when you look at up to 100 different compounds, all in varying degrees of presence in any particular plant, there's almost an infinite variety of different types of profiles that you could get, each one of which might have a different therapeutic application.
But now, when we start with a cell line in biotech, for the FDA, we have to create a master cell bank because we have to show that the drug we're making today, the protein, the monoclonal we're producing, will be the same. Is it the same in your business?
We hope someday to achieve that level of clarity. The fact of the matter is that because of the federal nature of cannabis scheduling, there has been a prohibition on cannabis research for the past 40 years. That has stymied our ability to understand exactly how the plant works and also to do the kind of cell banking and the kind of genetics research, genetics profiling and banking of that information that we would like to do. That's changing. It's changing slowly, but it's changing. And so we hope in the next 5 to 10 years to start having much more precise profiles of what these plants are and what they do.
I want to talk to you about profiles when we get into the recreational. Because coming from a genetic engineering house years ago, we saw that the recreational people were trying to create brands by actually profiling, my Model A is better than Michael's Type B. But now, when you try and put together a uniform product, as a medical supplier, how do you start when you have a plant that has such a diverse background?
It's very difficult to do, and you sort of think of cannabis as similar to a blended alcohol type. So you've got your single malt scotch, you've got a blend, you've got a variety of different types of alcohol. The same, it's not exactly the same, but there's a similar type of way of looking at it. if you're looking to get the exact same cannabinoid profile every time repeatable, that's something that has to be done in the laboratory. There's no question about it. And until we find really replicable results from specific cannabinoid profiles, we're just not there yet because of the lack of research in the field. Today, we're really focused on whole plant medicine. And for a lot of the reasons that I stated earlier, the sort of the concert effect or the ensemble effect, as some have called it, of cannabinoids working together, the whole plant application of this medicine, it really is effective and more effective in many cases than single isolated compounds. So for a number of years, pharmaceutical companies have isolated the THC molecule and put it into pill form, a pill out there called dronabinol or Marinol. Folks can take it on, by and large, it's not nearly as effective, though, as whole plant administration. And the idea there is it's very likely because of this concert effect between a number of different cannabinoids. THC by itself isn't as effective.
We found that, again, monoclonal antibodies. Took a hybridoma, we made a specific monoclonal, and yet polyclonals that were made in goats many times had a better track record, because what they found was it's, the orchestra playing together. It's not one monoclonal that served all applications. Sounds like it's very similar, that the whole plant is greater than the sum of the individuals.
That's what we believe today. And so at our facility, we don't work to isolate single cannabinoid molecules. Instead, we look for plants that have a genetic profile that's commonly accepted by the patients that we serve, and we try to replicate those plants. And we do so using old-fashioned genetic, agricultural genetic cloning techniques. We basically take a cutting off a plant, and we know that if we have a plant of known origin that we flowered before, that we know turns into flowers that work for people at the dispensary, we simply take a cutting
and graft
replant
it,
and it's a genetic.
It's the old
duplicate.
grafting technology that we've been using in wheat and other plants for 100 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of this cannabinoid manufacturing isn't voodoo at all.
That's correct. Yes.
You're really just building on techniques we've been using forever in our mainstream natural products.
That is correct, and I think that there's a lot of focus. It certainly is focus in the cannabis industry on the high-tech nature of isolating cannabinoids. There's work being done there. What we're trying to do in Milford is to use the old-school agricultural techniques and really focus on the whole plant therapeutics.
Well, I can see it, because let's face it, the sex appeal is in, well, look what we just did with the DNA sequencer.
That's right.
Look what we can, and then you sit there and say, yeah, but 90% of our corn is done the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, yeah.
So the sizzle may be there, but what I'm eating, my meal, is old-fashioned, tried and true, and it's sounding more and more like the cannabinoid process, or the cannabis plant, is kind of like new plant, old school.
It is in many respects. I mean, we have, again, two businesses in one, or sort of two divisions in one, in the Milford facility. One of them is this agricultural application where we pay a lot of attention to the media that we grow in, organic types of soil, how do we amend that soil, how do we make sure that it replicates natural soils that would be found out in the earth, and then the nutrient regimens that we give to these plants, very, very important. Of course, all of our finished products are tested by third-party laboratories for a variety of different possible contaminants, heavy metals, pesticides, plant growth regulators, yeasts and molds, all types of different things required by DPH, Department of Public Health. So we have to be very careful about how we cultivate these plants, how we grow these plants. Cannabis plants are known accumulators of certain types of problematic elements, pesticides in particular, heavy metals as well. So when we work, for example, we work with the finest soil substrate media. When we take our water, we start with Milford water, but we clean it in reverse osmosis cleaning systems, and then we reintroduce nutrients in very precise dosage levels, so we know exactly what goes into those plants. We don't want to be caught at the other end of the spectrum, having accumulated heavy metals
Now,
or
wait a
other
minute,
pathogens.
dang it, those plants are getting 10 mega ohm water, they're getting cleaner water than I'm getting in my home.
That's very true.
I mean, I joke about it, but if you're putting it through an RO system, you're putting out 10 mega ohm water, and I'll never see that in my house.
That's very likely, yes.
Now, one of the things that obviously is frightening is when people were buying marijuana from Joe, the dealer on the street, right, they weren't necessarily, these people weren't known for their healthiest cultivation techniques. So spraying paraquat or pesticides, using water that's contaminated with heavy metals, if it made the plants grow faster, I don't know that they had a conscience.
Well, I'll tell you, Al, I'm glad that you asked about that, because one of the really big distinctions between the regulated cannabis marketplace today and the unregulated cannabis marketplace is exactly that, contaminants in the product. And in the old days, nobody really thought about that. Where does your marijuana come from? There's no choice. And so, you didn't think, gosh, these guys are filling this stuff full of all kinds of nasty contaminants. Today, running our business in Milford, we know very well it would be very easy to use very, very nasty types of pesticides.
And you get bigger plants, you'd get better yields,
no
and
question.
you'd get sicker patients.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We're growing this stuff as medicine. And even those folks that plan to participate in the adult use or recreational marijuana marketplaces, those businesses will all be regulated to the same testing standards that we have for medical marijuana, which is very important. You'll get bigger yields if you use that stuff, and it's not tested. So whenever you buy a product from the regulated cannabis marketplace today in Massachusetts, it comes with labeling. All the testing data is right there, provided by third party. In fact, one of the best third party labs in the state we have right here in Milford, Pro Verde Labs, up on Fortune Boulevard.
See, and to me, I know where you live. I
That's
know
right.
where your family assets are.
Yes.
So I'm not going to say whether or not somebody should smoke, just like I won't say whether they should drink. Just like, that's a decision that law says you have the right to make. Fine. But if you're going to partake in marijuana, I certainly want to know that it's not full of paraquat, even if I'm not smoking it. If you're smoking pesticides, it means you're going to be sick. My health dollar is going to go to supporting the illnesses. So I don't see where, we make a very strong distinction between, FDA-approved drugs and a lot of times other substances. I certainly am hoping that the burden they place on you as a medical provider will be no more onerous, but no less onerous as a recreational. I still want to make sure that the heavy metals aren't there, that you are feeding it better water and better nutrients. You talk about soil. So you just don't go out back on Fortune Boulevard and dig some dirt and throw it in the pots?
No, we pay quite a bit of attention to the soil that we put into the facility. We have that tested. There's soil and substrate testing requirements by the Department of Public Health. Each time we make a new amendment or mix a new batch of soil with a different amendment than the last time, we're required to retest that, send the results to the Department of Public Health. So it's a very strict regimen for all of the different inputs into these plants.
But again, it's making me feel more and more like what we do in cell culture in the biotech industry. That medium is tested ad nauseum. If you change the medium, you have to report it, you have to validate it. You can't just go out and buy, normal media.
That's exactly right. Another piece of this is that, if you don't trust your local cannabis business for whatever reason, you can trust that there's an economic incentive at the very least for those guys to play by the rules. And that economic incentive is that it's extraordinarily capital intensive to build one of these facilities. It takes huge amount of time and effort to apply to the Department of Public Health for the license in the first place, to continue ongoing good manufacturing practices, quality assurance protocols. DPH comes down and does inspections of our facility once every month to 6 weeks.
Once every 6 weeks?
Yeah, can you imagine?
No, FDA used to come to our building once every year or two, and that was enough to drive me nuts.
Well, I'll tell you, the Department of Public Health has really done an extraordinary job implementing the medical marijuana program. This wasn't something that department asked for. It was given to them by ballot initiative from the vote of the people, but they really took it up and ran with it, and they've got an extraordinary
Now, you mentioned it's
compliance
capital
department.
intensive.
Yeah.
I buy a building, I get a heat lamp, I get a couple pots, and I'm making marijuana, no?
Al, if only it were so easy, I can tell you. We take a very high-tech approach. In order to cultivate and manufacture high-quality, pest and pathogen-free cannabis products, it takes an extraordinary amount of technology. We need to keep the environments in the cultivation rooms to a very, very tight tolerance in terms of temperature,
Humidity.
air humidity, and also lighting. So it's true we use synthetic lighting or grow lights, and we also, because we're an enclosed facility, we have to use an extraordinary amount of mechanical air conditioning to take the heat out of those rooms that's generated by those lights. Something else that's interesting to note is that cannabis plants, like a lot of plants, shed water. They transpire quite a bit. When you grow crops out in the fields, if you water them, up to 95% of the water that you put into the roots of those plants gets transpired out the leaves. If you're outside, that moisture just gets carried away by the wind. Inside, when we have these controlled growing environments, we have to mechanically remove that water from the room. And we actually have an extraordinarily complex and robust HVAC, air conditioning and dehumidification system in the facility. In fact, most of the investment in the facility was in the environmental controls. And so at our facility in Milford, we have an enormous amount of HVAC, enormous amount of air conditioning, enormous amount of dehumidification, and it's all controlled by a central computer system that constantly monitors the environments in each of our controlled grow rooms and adjusts those levels accordingly. So it's quite a sophisticated operation.
And then you got to make sure that you're not allowing mold, bacteria, things to grow that are naturally in the air.
That's correct. Now, we can control for most of those things by keeping tight environmental controls. So we keep our relative humidity relatively low. Temperature is a mean at about 75 degrees. And the lights are on for 12 hours, they're off for 12 hours. As long as we can maintain those economic conditions and keep a good amount of airflow in the room, that pretty much takes care of mold and mildew type problems. Other type problems that we worry about are just traditional problems, plant disease. Disease is endemic to cannabis plants. So it's about making sure that they've got robust nutrients, that they're well watered, and they're essentially like keeping people happy. You give them good food, give them a little exercise, people generally tend to stay healthy.
The added burden that you can't use things like pesticides or growth factors.
That's correct.
So you've got to make sure the environment stays true.
So it really depends what you mean by pesticide, because pesticide under the Massachusetts regulation is anything that you put on a plant in order to control a pest. And so what we try to do is stick with federal certification organic requirements. And so we put on things like lemon juice, for example, would be one type of application. Very, very innocuous, no chemicals, anything like that. We also use what we call an integrated pest management program, which actually makes use of beneficial insects. So we can actually purchase, believe it or not, little insect larvae. They come in these little bags. We hang them around the grow rooms, and they pop out of their bags one at a time, and they're sort of carnivores that go after any bad insects that might have made their way into the facility. So we use these beneficial insects to eat the bad insects, all in the service of not using pesticides that are non-organic.
Now, you mentioned economics. One of the things that you always read about is you having to kind of navigate between state law and federal law.
That's correct.
How does that work? I mean, if I want to buy medical marijuana, I'm assuming I get a prescription.
Yes, you get what we call a certification from a physician. A prescription is a technical term. Prescription writing ability is a license given to a physician, a medical doctor, by the Drug Enforcement Agency and the FDA. The Drug Enforcement Agency, FDA, will not allow medical doctors to prescribe cannabis medicine today. So instead, a doctor will give what we call a certification under state law. That certification would then allow a person to go get registered with the Department of Public Health in the medical marijuana program. They would get an ID card that then allows them to come to one of our dispensary facilities.
But does that tell me how much I can buy, or?
In fact, it does. So in your physician written certification, there'll be a certain amount of cannabis medicine you can buy in a certain 60-day period. 60 days is the time frame. And so as a patient would come to our facility, they show us the ID card. We actually check in real time with the Department of Public Health database to see, okay, A, is this patient actually registered? And B, do they have an allotment of cannabis medicine remaining in their certification in order to purchase it?
So I can't just come in and say, Michael, I want a pound or two?
You can't. You can't do that, no. If a patient is certified and has an amount remaining, they would then be allowed into the facility. But believe it or not, Al, every single purchase that they make, we have to enter back into the Department of Public Health
So
database
it takes off their
in real
allotment.
time. It debits their allotment to, of course, prevent someone from dispensary hopping, if you will.
So you've got control to make sure that you don't have like, the dispensary hopping, or we used to call physician hopping, to get, opioids at 3 different places and
Right.
abuse it.
That's correct.
Now, I come in, I get my allotment. What's a typical allotment for a patient over a month?
It could be up to 10 ounces of marijuana in the 60-day period. So, and anywhere underneath that. It's at the
So it's like
discretion
5
of the-
ounces a month. You're not buying it for a block party here.
That's correct.
Okay, so now you give me my 5 ounces for this month. You want paid. My family is one of the typical ones that, God bless my darling bride, my ungrateful offspring. I think between them they carry $2 cash.
Okay.
Everything's done on a credit card.
Right.
Can I lay my credit card down with you?
Currently in the cannabis space, banks will not take credit card transactions. However, we do take debit cards. So there is quite a bit of plastic that we do take at,
Oh,
at
okay.
the store. In fact, today our debit to cash transactions is about 60-40%. So we take actually more debit cards than we do cash. So for a long time, folks had seen this as just a cash business. It's really not just a cash business here in Massachusetts. We're fortunate in this state to have banking partners that will work with cannabis companies. This has been an intermittent situation in other parts of the country. So in Colorado and California, you may have heard that there have been some banks that have allowed cannabis, some banks that don't allow cannabis businesses. Today in Massachusetts, we're very fortunate to have banking. So we have typical business banking accounts. And when we take debit cards, they would just be transacted in the same way any company would take a debit card.
Now, if I go and buy metformin or something for diabetes, and I'm going to travel, so I'm going out to one of the square states in the middle of the country, I put my little medicine in my bag, without worry that anybody will challenge me. I can say, look, I'm a fat old man, I need this medicine.
Yep.
What happens if I'm using medical marijuana to stop my tremors? Can I fly to a square state with marijuana in there and not worry?
This is a real problem because the discrepancy between the laws at the federal and the state levels really prevents you from being able to do that safely. We certainly would never recommend that anyone travels outside of the state of Massachusetts with the medicine that we sell at our dispensary. Our state-sponsored program sanctions the sale and the use of medical marijuana solely within the state.
Inside Massachusetts.
That's correct. Now, one might say, okay, so Colorado has a medical marijuana law and Massachusetts has a medical marijuana law. Can I fly from Boston to Denver, for example? Well, I mean, we wouldn't recommend it for the sole reason that the airspace that's controlled
doesn't.
and even at the airport, that's federal territory. The TSA is there to inspect the baggage. And you're flying over federal airspace at the time, so it's really not advisable to travel between states.
I got a house down the Cape. I'm going down the Cape for the weekend. I drive through Rhode Island. I mean, I'm technically breaking the law, aren't I?
I think I would have to say today that the Massachusetts medical marijuana program would not protect you if you had one of Massachusetts medical cannabis products in your car in Rhode Island.
Seems silly.
I'll tell you, it's one of these things. It's a really interesting dichotomy between federal and state here. We've got long-standing federal law that does not allow cannabis activity, and we've got laws in now a vast majority of American states that in some way either decriminalize, medicalize, or even recreationalize the use of cannabis. I think most of us agree that it's only a matter of time before the research and medical efficacy catch up and the FDA would sort of reschedule cannabis and turn it into some kind of a medicine. It's a real movement in the United States.
But I mean, anytime, and I'm prejudiced because I'm from the scientific side, but anytime that we've had politicians trying to dictate science, I mean, if you remember the stem cell issues, where, oh my God, you can't have stem cell research, and then you realize people are not going to do bad things to get fetal stem cells. But the politicians said, well, this is a good thing to run on. I can get a lot of attention in my next campaign if I'm against fetal stem cells or adult stem cells. And the whole idea of the origin of fetal stem cells went away when we went to adult stem cells, but still,
Yes.
it was stem cells. So I wonder if, the whole marijuana debate from the political side, we talk about isn't still emotional versus scientific.
I think that there is a lot of emotion in it, but I would also say that, look, we're in favor of research-based policy. We're in favor of fact-based policy. And one of the things that's problematic in the marijuana or cannabis space is that there just isn't enough research. Now, the question could be asked, why isn't there enough research?
Well, if you're outlawing it on a federal level, it's kind of hard.
It's a problem.
And what kills me is the FDA years ago came out with a big directive that we're going to go on evidence-based recommendations, evidence-based medicine. Show me the data, and we'll base our decisions on the data. Well, that makes sense, but if I'm right, you're banning on a federal level marijuana research. How do you generate enough data to have results-based medicine?
That's a great question. It's a catch-22 that the cannabis research community has been caught in for a number of years. We've started to see a little bit of easing. It's moving in fits and starts, and we hope to see more of this type of research being done in the future. Today, I think some groups of researchers, some facilities and organizations like ours are trying to push this type of research forward at the state level. That won't obviously satisfy federal regulators, but it's a push to start that process. And we hope that we can move the needle as the years.
It just seems like you're building a big fence. If I have one of, you say, 9 indications that the cannabinoid products can help with, you're building a fence around Massachusetts, because if I'm a good citizen, I don't want to break federal law, I can never go to New Hampshire. Or I have to somehow take my cannabinoid medicine, then go.
It's a vexing problem. I would urge everyone watching this program to write to their congressperson and tell them that this is an issue that needs to be solved.
And now I buy my 5 ounces, whatever, and you've made sure that when I get it, it's mold-free, it's all this. How do I keep it that way? Do you sell me a container to maintain it, or?
We do. We essentially sell all of our flower products in child-proof, opaque, airtight, sort of resealable bags, Mylar bags, so you can reseal those, you put them away, and it'll keep for a number of months. So it's very shelf stable. All the products that we create are very shelf stable, so it's not going to spoil or go bad. And hopefully you would use your allotment in the time period that it was certified for, and then you would come back and buy more.
Does it have a best used by? Is there an expiration date that you
does.
validated?
It does. We have a born on date and a best used by date on all the products that we sell.
So now we talk about recreational marijuana. Whether you agree with it or not, it's here.
That is correct.
We're not going to do away with it. One strong advantage I can see, well, 2. One is safety. The other is I'm taxing the heck out of it.
That's right.
So Joe the dealer on the corner, aren't I taking away his, it kind of reminds me of the lottery. The minute we came out with the lottery, the bookies business went down by 90%.
That's right.
Am I naive in believing it won't have the same effect with the illegal drug market?
I think we're looking at exactly the same effect. And so for those folks who are nervous about recreational cannabis, I think the first thing that needs to be said is recreational cannabis is here. It's been here for decades. It's simply being run by underground criminal syndicates and illegal operators. It's not being taxed. It's not being regulated. It's unsafe. And it just makes no sense to continue that marketplace and really allow that marketplace to thrive. Even with the regulated medical marketplace, we see a number of illicit market operators still out there operating with impunity. And so I think that bringing this into a regulated marketplace is a much better option for us as a community.
Why would I buy from Joe the dealer if I could go and buy it? And again, I'm not saying you should, but if I'm going to buy pot, why would I buy it from Joe the dealer where I don't know what I'm getting versus from a regulated house?
I mean, that's a question that I think is best answered in the minds of your viewers. I think it's a pretty easy decision to make.
I mean, realistically, you're not condoning it. I mean, I got to admit, if it's now legal, I haven't gone and bought any marijuana just because, oh my God, it's legal, I want it.
That's right.
I just haven't smoked it, you know. It's like saying if you put another package store in the area, I'll go drink more.
Right.
I don't know that the cause and effect really has any valid ties. But how will that affect your business?
Well, it's an interesting question. One of the things that's a little bit interesting about the differences between medical and recreational cannabis is that the forms of those products are very similar. It's the cannabinoid molecules that have the therapeutic effects. It's also those cannabinoid molecules that have the effects that adult users are seeking. And so really there's not much of a difference between medical and recreational products. Now there are some differences. For example, the level of the cannabinoid molecules, the number, the dosages are much higher on the medical side. There are very tight dosage limits on the recreational or adult use side. So for example, of the THC molecule, 5 milligrams per serving is what's mandated by the state recreational marijuana law, where there is no upper limit on the medical side. So you could have a dose that could be 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, even 100 milligrams for a user that has either a tolerance or needs that type of high-level dosage.
Now, a serving, I mean, I'm being a bit trite, is that like per joint? I mean, how do you measure a serving? Because when I look at my cereal box, you know, yes, if I eat 3 Cheerios, I can meet my calorie limit.
That's right.
So the serving limit, okay, I love these Fruit Loops. Oh, you get 4.
Right. Right. I think serving sizes are going to be delineated in a similar way, to be frank. What it has to be is a clearly delineated amount so someone can know precisely what they're taking. It's not so much about making it bigger or smaller. It's simply about informing the consumer that if you take this piece, this is the effect you're going to get. So
it's more like a proof statement on alcohol?
Very similar to a proof
statement. It's
statement.
40 proof or 60 proof,
Correct.
So you don't drink brandy like it's wine and get a surprise?
Right. That's right.
Are there any major issues moving to recreational for the business?
There really are not that many issues. I mean, I think the issues are primarily on the facility siting and licensure side, the business side. In terms of manufacturing, all the processes are the same. There will, of course, be labeling requirements that are different for the recreational use than for the medical use. We would incorporate that, I think, relatively easily into the labeling part of our operation. And I think the economics of the recreational side are problematic for those of us who initially intended to move forward solely with medical. So when I started this business back in 2013, it was almost inconceivable to me that we would have recreational marijuana just a few short years later here in Massachusetts. We had seen it in Colorado and in Washington, just turning at that time. But it really seemed like years and years, if ever, that Massachusetts would go recreational.
Is the pricing the same?
Pricing would be the same, but for a tax that's levied by the state on the recreational cannabis. So we've got a 20% tax on recreational cannabis from the state, and that's 6.25%, our typical sales tax, with an excise tax in addition to that of 10.75%, and then a local tax of up to 3%. So you're looking at a 20% sales tax out of the gate on recreational products. So medical products, medical marijuana is treated like every other medicine in Massachusetts, tax-free. So not even a sales tax, no 6.25.
So you've got 20% right off the top that recreational is going to cost more.
That's correct. That's correct. When you throw in the dosage requirements, it's lower doses relative to the medical, and there's also purchase limits. So with recreational, there's a 2-ounce purchase limit at any given time. That's not true on the medical side. So you take purchase limits, dosage limits, and then the price premium. There will still be a market for medical. The problem is that the marketplace, as we've seen in Western states that have gone to recreational, the marketplace for recreational is really substantially larger than the medical-only marketplace. if you think about the barriers to becoming a patient in the medical side, you have to go to see a physician. That generally costs between $200 and $400. It's not covered by insurance because of our federal problem, so folks have to pay that out of pocket. You have to pay $50 to DPH in order to get your medical card, and then of course you also have to have yourself listed on the medical use of marijuana program list. And sometimes folks don't want to give up their anonymity, and so because of that, we believe that there will be a substantial number of patients who are actually using cannabis or marijuana for medical purposes that will simply drop off the medical program and buy those products on the recreational side instead, where they don't have to pay fees for the doctor, they don't have to be delineated. They don't have to
But they're
have their
going to
name
be
on the
paying
list.
20-odd% more
They will
as
be
a
paying.
premium.
That's correct. You'll pay a premium of 20% for those attributes. So we think that that the medical marketplace is going to shrink a bit, and we think that the recreational marketplace is going to be substantially larger. And so, for our organization, we're taking a long look at doing both. We're committed to the medical marketplace. That's where we came from. That's where we want to continue to operate. But in order to continue to operate as a going concern, we believe that it's probably going to be imperative for us to also do the other business as well, do the recreational
So I'll
business.
put you on the spot. We just went through an emotional roller coaster. It seemed like a group in Milford was very passionate about not having recreational stores, took language from another town, and then somewhere in between said, wait a minute, we're doing what?
Yeah.
We're chasing two businesses out of Milford? How did that affect you?
I have to say that I think now looking back, the entire process from beginning to end was actually, it was a very educational process for me. And the end result was that we have a much closer relationship with our host community here in Milford. And that's not to say we had a bad relationship before. I think our relationship with the community of Milford was essentially we were non-known.
You told to be stealth?
We were.
My understanding was
that's correct.
Whoever advised you said best come in low-key, stay way under the radar.
And that's exactly what we did. We knew that we had a job to do. We didn't want to bother anybody. We went in, we built our facility, we operated quietly, we kept it secure. In fact, I would argue or sort of suggest that probably very few folks in Milford
We didn't even know you existed.
didn't even know we were there. When we heard that there was a proposal to outlaw all recreational cannabis uses, which would have included what we do here in Milford, which is not retail, but just this products manufacturing and agricultural component of it, we were alarmed. We thought, gosh, we're not sure that we can survive as a business if we just stay medical. We had thought about moving into the recreational space. And so, we got together with the proponents of that ballot initiative, and we worked through some of their objections. And I think we basically hammered out a compromise that was effected at town meeting, where both sides felt that they got a fair shake. And so I think, again, like I said, looking back at the process, we feel very comfortable with the outcome there. We're very gratified that we were able to compromise and come together with the Board of Selectmen here, with the townspeople, with the folks that were opposed to recreational retail, and sort of come up with a compromise solution that worked for everyone. And so, as you may know, the sort of archaic process or the complicated process that has been articulated by the state recreational cannabis law is requiring us to go back again to ballot initiative. We started with a ballot initiative. It was changed somewhat at town meeting, and that's really where the issue lies, is because that ballot language that passed in Milford on September 19th of last year was changed at town meeting. There is now required to be another ballot initiative which essentially mimics the town meeting language, sort of a ratification of the town meeting vote. So we're moving forward with the Milford Cares organization and other community groups to say, look, we all agree that this is the outcome that we want. We got it at town meeting. Unfortunately, we have to go back and have another ballot initiative to ratify it, but we're all willing to do that, and we're just going to go do it shoulder to shoulder together.
I could say welcome to Milford belatedly, because now the genie's out of the bottle, and frankly, I like the fact that the genie's out of the bottle, because now you're giving money.
That's correct.
You're helping the community, because why don't you tell our viewers what you committed to?
Well, we've committed, as we would have in any case under the recreational marijuana law, to $250,000 per year back to the community. Of course, we're always looking for ways to give back to the community. We have a hiring preference for folks who come from Milford in the first place, and we just want to give back to the community in any way that we can.
And that's not a pilot.
No, it's not
I
a
mean,
pilot.
you're
That's
paying
straight up.
full board, normal 1.5 taxes.
That's correct.
So, I know people have said, well, is that like a pilot that they don't pay taxes and they give the $250,000? No, that's above and beyond what, if you were a shoe manufacturer, you would be paying.
That's absolutely correct. That's right.
And we saw you helping out our medical center,
Yes, we had
Melange.
We went to the Melange. We had a wonderful time up there. They do such great work at the medical center. It was our pleasure to not only to contribute by participating in the Melange, but also to helping fund one of their positions in the emergency department there. Very, very happy to do it.
And that, I think, is a lot of what people didn't understand. Why don't we know you're there?
Yeah,
Well, you're trying to be a good citizen and stay below the radar.
that's right.
And as Milford always does, nothing stays below the radar.
Well, look, again, as I said, we're happy that the process turned out the way it did, and I think in some ways it's better that it happened this way. It sort of allowed folks to understand better what we do, brought a lot of folks through the facility, and actually showed them. I think one of the things that's been interesting to me is that when folks actually come to the facility, see what we do there, they say a lot of things, but they always say the same thing at the end, which is, "This is not what I expected to see." It's not the sort of pot shop that we envisioned from the old days. It's very high tech, it's very tightly controlled, high security, and very low profile.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing because, we've had discussions over and over about opioid users, where you have a vision of what you grew up, what you thought was a heroin addict. And then you find out it's your neighbor's son or daughter
That's right.
that got hooked because they're all-American football, baseball, soccer players that had an injury. So the whole paradigm shifted. And I think shows like this for our 6 viewers and others will help us get a better understanding that right, wrong, or indifferent, some people are going to smoke marijuana or eat gummy bears or brownies, Not my place to tell them whether they should or not. The law says they can. So as an adult, they'll make up their minds.
That's right.
But I'd much rather know that they're getting their product from somebody like you, because I know where you live. I know where your family lives and your assets. You're not going to mess around and give me tainted product intentionally or because you don't care.
That's right. That's right.
Still hung up on 10 mega ohm water to plants. That's so much better than anything I get.
I have to make a comment on the opioid crisis that we have here, as you raised. You brought it up. It's really one of the most tragic and vexing problems that we have in our society today. And sometimes there's a subset of folks out there that are really convinced that marijuana is what we call, or what's been called a gateway drug, that it leads to some other drugs. And I really want to take issue with that. I think that there's really very little evidence to show that that's in fact the case. And when it comes to the opioid crisis in particular, cannabis and marijuana products, I think, actually combat that crisis in 2 ways. The first way is that cannabis medicine can substitute as a first-line therapy instead of opioids. When you've got certain types of pain, that doesn't work for everything, but for certain types of neuropathic pain that opioids might otherwise be prescribed for.
Maybe you don't start down that track.
You don't start in the first place. And when you've got this level of as I say, efficacy to toxicity so low, you can't overdose and die from cannabis. You simply can't. And we've all, or many of us, have had the experience of having someone we know or love unfortunately have an overdose and die from a
But Chris, let me put it to you. I would say I do not see any evidence that says marijuana is more of a gateway drug to something than I see alcohol, or less.
It's just not there.
It feels like, wait a minute, I'm taking something from left field, it's cold today, so therefore next month it will rain. Wait a minute. Where does one tie to another? I drink, therefore I'll go to heroin. or opioids
right.
that'll lead to heroin. I don't see any evidence any more or less tying marijuana as a gateway drug than I do alcohol or anything else.
That's right. That's right. I would simply add that the second way that cannabis can help with the opioid crisis is that for some folks, it can help ease off of opioids. Folks that have a problem with opioids as part of their therapy, can't do it by itself, as part of their therapy and reentry away from the opioid medications. Marijuana
I like
can
your
play a
first
role.
point. If I don't go down the opioid path at all,
That's right.
if this can keep me from going there, boy, I'm happy at that point.
No doubt.
Well, thank you for educating us. Thank you for being a good Milford company.
Well, thank you very much, Al, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining in. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. God bless. And I look forward to continuing this series now that we've opened the door for testing to talk to another Milford company about why and how do we test marijuana. Good night, all. Thank you.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.